Good to see everybody. How's everybody doing? All right, so I didn't change the title officially. So this is a study about the Christian home and family. And in some of my studies, I ran across this. And one of the things that we really have tried to emphasize to the young men in our young men's leadership training is how important preparation is. And so I think that's one of the aspects that we need to consider when we're talking about the Christian home and family, is actually preparing for that. I know that we have a wide range of ages in the class, and all of us are in different phases of life as far as where we're at with our home and our family, but everybody's got valuable input that I hope that you're going to be able to contribute to the class. And for those that are watching on YouTube, if you didn't see Jesse's email, so we do want to make sure that we get everybody's comments, everybody's questions, and so if you have anything even during class and you're watching on YouTube, feel free to text Jesse and we'll try to get that added to our class. So it's been, I don't guess it's been that long since I've taught a Bible class upstairs, but this is the first time in a while that I've taught this type of Bible study. When we were doing the 3-cycle approach, obviously my approach is different than I would normally be for a Bible class, and so for those that maybe haven't been in one of my Bible classes in a while, my objective is to get you involved, okay? And that's not because I'm trying to make anybody look bad, make anybody feel bad. I know that we have a tendency sometimes to not say a lot in public settings. This is the class where I need you to speak up. Because we've all got good experiences and bad experiences that we need to be able to share. And our hope and desire is that we're going to help everybody in our goal of building godly homes and godly families. Because ultimately, we all want to go to our godly home, our eternal home. And that's why this is so important. So as is always the process with my classes in these types of classes anyways, I'm going to randomly call on people. Again, I'm not trying to call you out, not trying to make you look bad, but just be prepared for that. Obviously, you can still raise your hand and add input, but I want to make sure that we get as many people involved as we can. So I didn't necessarily lay out lessons in 13 lessons. What I did is just kind of took topics that I feel like we really need to hit on throughout the class, and hopefully you can see a kind of progression with the home and the family. So tonight we'll talk about the home and family in the beginning, and then next we'll talk about this, however long it takes to talk about this. This is a pretty good foundational start for our class. But then we'll talk about God's design in marriage. We're going to talk to the men specifically, and what are the man's roles in regards to the family? What are the women's roles in regards to the family? Obviously, that's both as a husband and as a father, or as a wife and as a mother. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about why marriages fail. And I told Jesse he can be my hype man with the email that he sent out. And with the sermons on Sunday morning, we've touched on some of this. But we're going to get into why marriages fail. And it's not just marriages in the world. We have marriages within the church that too often are failing. And we want to grow marriages that don't fail. And so we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about discipline in the home. And I've kind of pulled this out and to talk about before we start talking about the parenting of different age groups, because discipline entails so many different things in regards to training. And so I feel like it needs its own kind of topic for us to hit on. And all of us like to talk about getting whipped, right? We can all share our stories, you know. Like when my dad broke the paddle on me. I can tell you all about that. So we'll talk about discipline in the home. And then we're going to look at parenting from some different aspects, some different age groups, because there are certain things that we need to know, and things are going to be different depending upon how old the child is. And I think a really good start for this was when we did a Generation That Knows Not God, and the Waldrons really kind of hit on teaching different age groups. And so this, I think, is something that's very important. And one of the things that I know that that book doesn't deal with, but we're going to talk about adult children and what responsibility do parents have with adult children. And then something that I think is going to pertain to making sure that you're preparing for a godly home and family is dating and then also picking a mate. So we'll talk some about that. And then problems that are facing today's families. And we're faced with so many problems that we need to be aware of and be mindful of. And then lastly, this is something that is becoming more real, I guess, to me, which most everybody knows that my mom and dad are going to be moving to Cookeville, and they're not in bad health, and so I'm not fixing to have to take care of them in that sense on a daily basis, but we do have situations right now of people that are having to take care of their aging parents, and I don't think that we talk about that enough, and the responsibilities that we have as Christian children to make sure that we are honoring our parents, not just because we're young and we're under their roof, and so we'll talk about that. So one of the things that I would like is to get as much interaction as possible, and if you have questions that you can think of that you want to know the answer to or you want us to discuss, or if you have a question that you think maybe other people need to hear, then please share that with me. And I will include it in whatever lesson that I think is going to be the best fit for that. So I'll remind you of this, but I want as much interaction and as much input from each of you. So at the very beginning of your lesson sheet, there are two passages that I have included, and we're going to talk about this more when we get to question 7, but I wanted to just kind of hit on this at the beginning. So Psalm 127 and verse 1, the first part of the verse says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it." And then Proverbs 24, 3 and 4, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established, and by knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." And so one of the things that I want us to get from this class is, one, and most important, there is a pattern. Okay, God has not left us in the dark with how to parent, with how to be a good spouse. We have what we need within Scriptures. And there is a specific pattern that we need to follow when it comes to parenting. But one of the things that this idea of building and having a pattern, it relates so well to me on a personal level with my work. And so I can be given a set of drawings from an architect or from an engineer, and their expectation is I'm going to build it exactly the way the plans say. Now I was involved with a pretty heated conversation with an architect and an engineer. I wasn't the one getting heated, but yesterday there was a huge debate on one of our jobs on, well, why did you do it this way? Because now you're asking for more money, and the architect and the engineer come back and telling the contractor, well, that's means and methods. Look, we told you what you had to do, but you can decide how you want to do it. That's your call, so now you got to pay for it. And so we understand that too with parenting and with marriage. There are very specific instructions that are given. There's a pattern that God has given for how we need to be as husbands and wives and how we need to be as parents. But there's not always specifics about everything. And so some of this is going to be, we have to determine as Christians what's the best way to raise our children in each different aspect. And, all of us combined, we've probably had some means and methods that have been successful, and we've probably had some that have not been very successful. And so I don't want you to think that we're going to not focus on God's Word, because that's going to be the focus, but we're also going to have to discuss things that we have done and how we have tried to raise our children, or things that we have tried within our homes and within our families. And so I want to make sure that I get that laid out up front, that there is a pattern, there's a way, and that's what's most important. But we're going to talk about some of the specifics too of things that maybe that have worked or not worked with us. So stepping right into the questions, is a study of the Christian home and family needed? So can everybody answer that question? Yes. All right. So now I want to hear why. Ken, why do you think a study like this is needed?
Well, God expects the home to be a certain way. He expects to have children in submission, obedient children. He expects us to have a good relationship with our spouses, and we see, his guidance on how that's to be done, so that's why.
Okay. Marissa, why do you think we need a class on the home and family?
At best, it's an area we can all agree in. At worst, if you don't focus on it, then as a family that's headed for disaster.
Yeah. Mr. Bill, what do you think? Why do you think we need a class on Christian home and family?
Well, I concur with that. There is a pattern for us to see in God's Word, so it's important to know what that is and why we're told to do that. You can see when people have strayed from this pattern that trouble soon follows, even when we have what's given in Genesis 2 about how it's outlined there. By the time we're in Genesis 4, we have somebody that has 2 wives already. So when we stray from the pattern, we're asking for trouble.
It's a good way to put it. We're just asking for trouble when we don't follow the pattern. I once heard a story about a little boy who he was just inconsolable, just crying, and couldn't stop. And he was in the car riding home after worship services, and the dad had asked him 3 times, like, what's wrong? And eventually the boy was able to speak up, and he said, the preacher said he wanted me to be brought up in a Christian home, but I want to stay with you guys. Today's society is reaping the fruit of weak and ineffective and fractured homes. And from the beginning of God's plan, we know that it was one man to be joined to one woman for the duration of a lifetime. And we don't see that too often, unfortunately. And when we think about the roles of husbands as fathers, as wives, and as mothers, and also as children, I hope that we can understand that we can be made more fruitful, that we can be made more faithful by a godly home. And just the opposite of that can occur as well. We can become less fruitful and become less faithful if we don't focus on our experiences with the home and with our family. And so I think that this is something that is definitely necessary, it's definitely needed, and something that we need to have as a constant reminder as we go through this life. Other comments on number 1?
Well, we just know that God has given us all things that pertain to life and godliness. 2 Peter 1:3, and marriage and family is definitely an essential part of life and godliness.
Definitely a central part. Norm?
Everything starts in the home. God's entire foundation is the home. It's what he first established. And he built everything on top of it, including his church. It's all based on what he established in the Garden of Adam and Eve and how he wanted humanity and human beings to be organized. And so if you take that apart, it's extraordinarily difficult to get anything else to fit in as you move on from that little basis. Whether it's a child, whether it's a mother, a father, a husband, a wife, just the cohesion of that one unit. If you take that apart, you wreck everything else that those lives have to do with.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yes, please.
Shannon?
Okay. Yeah, most everyone here knows, no disrespect at all ever, no matter whatever age is, but coming from a broken home does not mean that flowers, beautiful roses, no pun intended, sorta, can come from the garbage, the trials, the rubbish of all the years that may have been that. So that can become something, okay? So don't come down. Yes, God's word says what God's word says. However, there are people, there are mothers, there are fathers even, that can be like awesome and beyond that and can bring up children. It is the child, it is the person that has free will from the beginning. So please don't slam down quote unquote broken homes. Because they can be, and they are. If it wasn't for my mom in a whole thousands of ways, I wouldn't be here, for one thing. So please, just whole lot of stories, whole lot of truth. I have a niche, quote unquote, with this. So, I mean, you know, again, no disrespect, but it's, I hear it just pounding and pounding, but God's word says what it says. But things can bloom from that rubbish.
Oh, 100%.
Okay,
And I think
so-
that's one of the things that we need to understand too is there's no excuses. Okay, we're not going to be able to stand before God on the day of judgment and say, look, my family life was pretty bad. What did you expect? Okay, that's not going to be an excuse that we're going to be able to use. So, but God's desire is that there are godly homes. Yes, we all have free will, both as mothers and fathers and husbands and wives. And so because we are imperfect people, that means we're going to have imperfect families. We're going to have imperfect marriages. But that's not God's desire. And so the desire of this class is to help us in that regard, not to put down anybody, not to put down anybody that grew up in any kind of a broken home, not anything whatsoever. And so I also want to just say anything that, any stories that I might say or things that I have done as a parent and I share with you, I'm not meaning any disrespect if you've done something different, but we all know that there are things that have worked and things that maybe haven't worked, and so we're just trying to help each other to have that godly home, to have that godly family, not to put down any other families. In question number 6, we're going to talk about some families in Genesis. There's some pretty broken up families, and there's some pretty good that came from that, and that's what we would hope that good can still come from those situations, because we're not going to be able to use that as an excuse. So yeah, I'm not knocking anybody that's come. Actually, I have a lot more respect for people that have come from a broken home and come from difficult situations and come out of that. So that's definitely not going to be the focus. Ray?
You know, I was brought up in a family of girls and boys, and we had girls and boys, and it's just a lot different. My family at home, not my immediate family, my mother and father family. My mother was a member of the Presbyterian Church. Her daddy's a Presbyterian preacher. Daddy, he was raised up in the church of Christ. And so there we were. And the problem was that Mom would go this way, and Daddy and one of the boys go that way. One of them might not even go nowhere. But as it turned out, all 3 of the boys, all 3 of us, turned out to be children of God. But where did they turn out to be? And that's another big problem too, because you think that mother might have more pull on them than the others, but that just wasn't the way it happened. And so it is a problem. But the way it turned out, of course, that turned out what I think is right. And one of my brothers, he was right off from the very beginning a liberal, and he stayed that way, and he still is. And the other brother, he was kind of backwards and forwards, but it had to do there with where he grew up. And he grew up around Bangham, up in that area up in there. And then he married this girl, and her daddy was a elder at the church up there in Rickman, not Rickman, but Bam. And for a while, that went pretty good because of some of the preaching that was done there. I think everybody remembers J.T. Smith. And that's where he grew up. And his daddy was an elder there. But anyhow, they got some good sound preaching there from time to time. Because when he'd come home, he would preach there. They'd let him preach there. And he'd preach the truth there. And he married my daddy's sister's daughter, oldest daughter.
That's something that we'll talk about whenever we talk about parenting. Obviously, if you've got a mother and father that aren't both members of the church, there's some difficulties that are definitely going to be presented with that, and some things that we can.
See all different types. Because now I had 3 girls. Lynn, he had a boy and a girl.
No, Ben's just got a ball.
Yeah, that's right. He just got a boy. And then my other brother, it's a mixed up family, but anyway, he, let's see, what was he? 3 boys.
He had a boy.
But one a girl. Okay. That's talking about Vic.
I know.
That's right. He had a boy and a girl too. That's right. She knows more about than I do. But anyway, on that side of the family, most of the children came out to be with the liberals.
I don't know whether girls fight or not.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that some more whenever we. Yeah, we'll talk about that some more whenever we hit on the parenting aspect of it. So, what's the oldest divine institution on the face of the earth? Did you say heaven? Family. Sorry, my hearing ain't so good either. All right, so the family. So, when did it begin? All right. Creation, yeah, with Adam and Eve. Why did it begin? Okay, yeah, that was definitely God's plan. Norm?
God said it was not good. He realized it was not good for man to be alone. And we need companionship. We're social beings. The Godhead is 3. And we were made in the image of God. And so we've got this situation where we needed a companion, somebody that was suitable to be able to be a companion, to be the kind of companion that God intended to be able to make this thing called the family work. And so woman was made.
Yes. This was God's plan from the beginning, but in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 18, it says, "Then the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable to him." And we'll talk about that passage a little bit more, but that's the reason. So what's the purpose, though, of the family? What's the purpose of the home? Ken?
One of the purposes is to populate the earth. You couldn't have had anybody on earth if they didn't have at least 2 people to start with. And God wants, He wants, what's the word I want? Spiritual children, I guess is the word.
Okay. Lauren?
I think part of it is because he realized that one person cannot do it all alone. And I think that really relates back to our faith, although it is our responsibility on our own to have faith and to follow that faith. There's a reason that he made the church a family also, because when you choose your faith and choose that to be your life, what you dedicate your life to, you have to have help. You have to have people who support you and who understand you, who you can have fellowship with.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most beautiful figures that we have of the church, is the fact that we are a family. And there's a reason that it's called that, because families are supposed to be close-knit and tight and helping one another. Norm?
going to say that we don't think about the point that Ken brought up there as much, but if you look at the creation as a whole, we can see even within the animal kingdom at large, you have these structures, organizations, very very strong organizations of families and everything, whether it's the lions or the bald eagles or whatever and everything. And so this is just part of God's creation. But we just had this. We have as being made in His image. We also have this beautiful higher connection with Him, the spiritual side.
Yeah, what Ken referenced there, I mean, this was from the very beginning as well. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 28, God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." So that was one of the purposes of the family. Did I see another hand over here? Norm?
Well, it's interesting that when we talk about the dissolution of the family, like with divorces and things like that, it's in the sexual area of this area of procreation and the way that it is to be done godly. That's where that one exception comes in. So I don't find it odd at all. This is a big deal.
Yeah. Let's move on to number 3. What are the 2 other divine institutions? Just you can say them. The church and government. Okay? So Sue got it right and Ken got it wrong. Sue just told everybody she got it right and Ken got it wrong. So with the government or civil authority, we have to understand that God is not handpicking people, obviously, but we do know from Genesis chapter 13, verses 1 through 7, that in there it includes the statement that let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. And when was the church established? So if you think about, now we've got the home or the family, we've got government, and we've got the church. So how does the initial divine institution relate to the other 2? Norm?
It's the, like Norm was talking about earlier, the organizing principles and actions that are found within the scope of the family are translated out into these larger organizations. The church, it's a beautiful picture of it that's painted in the New Testament. But the governing authority is the same way. You have the levels of authority. You have the what is supposed to happen when you are supposed to be in submission to. All those are things that are learned in the family, and good citizenship starts in a good family.
Okay. So one of the things that I have said, both in preaching and with teaching, we talk about wanting to have a strong church. We want to have a church where unity and peace is. Well, if you're going to have a strong church, you got to have strong families. It's got to start there. And then if you want strong families, you need strong individuals as well. And so we have to think about our roles as individuals, as individual Christians, as husbands and wives, and as parents. But we also have to think about the strength of our families, and that's how you grow a strong church. Likewise with society in general, because basically as the family goes, so goes the church, and so goes society. And so it is very important. So this isn't on your sheet, but which of the 3 God-ordained institutions has the most influence on man?
Should have or does?
Could you repeat the question?
I said, which of the 3 God-ordained institutions has the most influence on man? Drew?
I would say the family, because it's
Should
the root of everything. It's where we learn everything. It's where everything starts.
Anybody disagree with that? Norm, you disagree?
I don't disagree. It's just the reason I said the should have is because we have a huge percentage of our population which is in dire straits all the time because the main influence in their life is not the family. They don't have a family. They were born, and that was the start of something different. But they may be influenced extraordinarily by government. China, for instance, the family is not a big deal over there. The government is everything. It is God over there, and that's 1.6 billion people. So, it's not common what we're talking about. That we're the exception.
Yeah. So I wrote something down here that I had read somewhere. I'm just going to read it to you. It says, statistics on how we spend our time show that the home is by far the most influential. Many people are not at all influenced by the church, and even those who are faithful members of the church are involved in church-directed activities for only a few hours each week. Many people spend little time thinking about the government, but most people are under the direct, profound influence of their homes for a great majority of their time. You have a much greater opportunity than anyone outside of your home to mold the thinking of those in your home. Don't forget your unique opportunity to serve the Lord by having the right kind of teaching influence on those closest to you. And I think this goes back to what Norm P. Kind of said at the beginning. This was God's plan from the very beginning of time, that we know that the plan was to have the church and to have it established, but long before the church ever was and long before Jesus ever was, God was working through families. I mean, we can look at Abraham's family and look at the work that God did through that family. And we can talk about that more with question 6. But it was always through families that he was going to work, not that obviously he wouldn't work through individuals and couldn't still work through individuals. But we see from the beginning with the family and the institution of the family that was part of God's plan. Anything else before we move on to number 4? All right, so define the following terms, and if you were paying attention or you listened to Jesse's sermon, you already got number 3, so you didn't even have to do any work for that one. So with the home, how would you define the home? Jesse, how would you define the home?
Well, it can be defined as a building or the person's occupying it in a very general way. It's almost hard to talk about. I don't know. It's like they overlap or they connect so much, don't they?
So it's a little tricky, huh?
Yeah. Talk about the home, you want to talk about what makes up a home. It starts with the husband and wife, then you get married, and you want to talk about the kids, and that's the family.
Let me get Ken and I'll get on to
Reminds me of a song that goes, a room is not a house and a house is not a home without love in that home.
Yeah.
And so a home just is made up of people, obviously, mom and a dad, not necessarily mom and a dad, but you would, I guess ideally there'd be a mom and a dad. There's not going to be any kids if there's not. So, it's made up of a family. So I have trouble distinguishing between a home and a family.
Okay. Okay.
I have 2. One I do not have residence in yet. It's where my soul will find rest. But while I'm here on this earth, home is wherever my wife is. Because pre and post kids, she is my home. That was the decision that was made when I married. So wherever she is, that's where home is for me.
Melissa?
Kind of think about home like I think about church. The church is the people, not the building. And home is the people, not the building, in the same regard.
Yeah. So there are many different definitions to the word home, but with aspect to what we are talking about, we're not talking about our dwelling place. The third one there kind of goes along with what Ken was saying, the abiding place of the affections, especially of the domestic affections. And then with what Norm P. was talking about, a place of refuge and rest, which is what we think of when we think about heaven. At least it should be what we think about. So one of the things that I think about when I think about home is Joshua 24:15, and it doesn't use the word home, but still it kind of gives us this idea, and everybody knows Joshua 24:15. If it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, Choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Now, was Joshua talking about his physical abode? No, we understand he wasn't talking about his physical abode, but this is a great passage for the home and the family, and a great example of a leader in the home. And you can make your choice for your family, but as far as me and my family, my house, my home, we're going to serve the Lord. All right, so family is, and actually I think I took this from the Nelson's Bible Dictionary. So a group of persons related by marriage and blood ties and generally living together in the same household. In biblical times, the family was a closely knit group. The grandparents often lived with their children and grandchildren in the same household. Of course, God's design for the family, the concept of the family as the basic social unit reaches back into the creation account found in Genesis 1 and 2, which we've talked about with the original institution of the family. A man was to be the husband of one wife and was to leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. And again, so what's going to make a home? What's going to make a family? Where is it going to start? Well, it don't start with the kids. What'd you say?
I started my marriage with a child.
Yes. Typically, you're not starting a family with a child, but yes, in unique situations, you are. It's going to start with a marriage. All right. We're going to, again, going back to the beginning, God made Adam and Eve, and so this is from, Jesse had these notes. This did come from the Nelson Bible Dictionary. So the union of a man and a woman as husband and wife, which becomes the foundation for a home and a family. So this is the foundation of any home, of any family, and that's where obviously we're going to start when we talk about the design for marriage. All right, any comments on that, on those? All right, so Genesis 2:18 through 25, just for lack of time, we're not going to go through and read that, but just give me some things that you learn about the home and the family from this passage. Of course, this is where God sees that there's not a suitable helper for Adam, and so he does the first surgery and creates woman from his rib. And so what are some things that you learn about the home and family from that passage? And I just realized I got to be, like I said Jesse earlier, and both of them are probably like, who's he talking to? So I got to make sure I clarify Jesse Jackson.
Everybody. And your tone is a little different when you talk to me.
Is it a little more loving? All right, Jesse Jackson, what can you learn from that?
I left a question mark on that because, there's still, you're talking about there's still at the point of innocence and the man and the woman were naked and didn't know it. And so the nature of the relationship is about to change, if you don't know the male from the female, in other words. That's kind of how you get to the point of creating a family. So I'm kind of got an incomplete answer on that because that was the state of innocence, so that's like two kids just running around and doing a little bit more than playing, I guess.
Okay. Andy?
Well, I thought about what you said earlier. I thought about this is the beginning of the blueprint for the family. So we don't have children here yet, but we do have the start of it. And it's like mine and your jobs, sometimes people want to come in and see the blueprint before we're done finishing it up. But we do have the very start of it.
Lena?
Obviously, verse 24 is the most of it. The man should leave his father and mother, what you quoted in the beginning, in the previous slide, which is contradicting. On one side, you said families live with grandparents and grandchildren all together, and then the other point you are saying leave father and mother and live on your own, basically. But this also relates to the things that we talked about, what is more important, the family or church or government. Here, they're supposed to be one flesh, so they're supposed to be together on everything, on all points of view, on how they establish their traditions, their life, their everyday routine, while even in the church, you don't do that. Everybody still does their own culture and everything, and then the family, you're supposed to be together on all of it.
That's a perfect marriage. If the husband and wife perfectly agree on everything.
Well, you're asking what can we learn.
Yes, that's definitely what we should learn. We need to strive for that. That is for sure. And let me just again say that's from Nelson. I didn't write that. But I do think that we understand there are often times where the grandparents are living with the parents. But I think that you can still do that, and you can leave your father and mother and cleave to your spouse. It's more of a figurative type. And I think we can talk about that more when we talk about marriage. Did I say another hand? Tiffany?
I think here too, he made a helpmate suitable for Adam. So, sometimes my husband would disagree. I think that we as wives are to be helpers. So we're there for each other. God took a rib from Adam to make Eve. So Eve technically is part of Adam, one flesh. So I think that when you combine together to become one flesh, you have to help one another, continue to grow.
Can you put that on the printer?
I told you what I'd say, but I'm just saying.
I love this class. So,
but it's hard sometimes, but
we're out of time. But to me, it's interesting. We'll pick up here next week. But out of everything that God created, remember what He said? It was good, or this is good, this is good, this is good. And He gets here and He says, this is not good. That's what we'll talk about next week. Thanks, everybody.